All right, we are live.
Everybody, welcome back. So, just going to jump right in. After we jumped off last time, I went and I finished up the ear. Again, brought it up to the level of the face. I didn't want to have to play with it at different levels. I should have actually painted it all at one time. But I'm going to jump in, I'm going to get the face going. I want to try to get the face as close to completion today as possible, resolve the hair, and then get into these planets. I did some white pencil marks using a General's white charcoal pencil, very sharp point, and I outlined some of my line drawing because from here, the angle, I can't see the drawing. So rather than standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down, I addressed it so I have some of my transfer lines. They're visible now. And there's no rule. Just because the transfer is underneath the drawing doesn't mean I can't work on top of it. I'm able to do this, and this stuff just wipes away. It's just like chalk. So I've got that in, and that's going to make it easy for me to get the hair resolved without standing up and sitting down. I'm going to start now by pushing back some of the darks in the face. So I want to deal with the darker things, like the eyes, the nostrils, some of the darks in the mouth, down in here, maybe pulling some of this hair. I want to get the eyebrows. I want to get those things in because they're going to create a contrast between these lights and those darks that are going to go in. And those darks are going to feel more like the background sky. Maybe not necessarily in color, though they will be blue. They may have a little purple in them. But they're going to go in very thin. They're going to go in like a glaze. And then I'll bulk up the lights a little bit. I'll bring them up based on how much I think they need to be adjusted, based on how dark these darker values are. So,
quick question about that, Kevin.
Yes.
Will the chalk of the charcoal pencil, will that mess with your paint?
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. The stuff that's going to go down in the hair is going to be opaque. It's going to be these paints. It'll be opaque, and so it'll just gobble that up. There's not a lot of. It's not like these are big, thick lines. It's not a lot of white charcoal on here. So I'm using the same palette from last week. Like this paint is all like it's dry on the outside, but it's wet inside. And so I'll be using those same things. That way I don't have to remix. I mixed enough paint. I should be able to resolve her, and hopefully if I get through it tonight, resolve the planets. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in, I'm gonna get to work. I started playing around this time before the camera started rolling, just to get a sense of how thick I wanted this paint to kind of glaze in and put in the eyes and the eyebrows and everything. So I have a sense of what I want it to be, and I kind of mixed it already. I'm gonna go with a smaller brush, give myself a little bit more control. And so I'm gonna be very careful. I'm gonna be as precise as I can be as I do this. Keeping an eye on my photograph as I go. Constantly moving back and forth. My eyes move back and forth from the photograph to the painting, probably 2 seconds on the photo, 2 seconds on the painting, back and forth, back and forth. I don't look at this for like 2 seconds and then spend 3 minutes here. Constantly moving back and forth, taking information from here, making sense of it, and getting it going on over here. You can see that contrast looks pretty good. I may go a little bit stronger later on in some of these areas, but for now that's a good color and value. It's not quite this blue, it's somewhere in here where we get some of the violets playing. And here, I'm gonna pull this down, create these eyelashes. And again, not individual eyelashes, but just a shape with some kind of tattered edges that help to describe what we would expect to see as a kind of a cluster of eyelashes. I need to really do much up in here. I can leave that alone. For now, I'll go in with a smaller brush for that fold, or I may just build up the lights and leave the value that's there. That might be a better option. And this edge, there's a little bit of a shadow being cast on the white of the eye here. This comes down and even creeps in here a little bit. A little bit less pressure allows the paint to dissolve, giving me what looks like a broader value range. Like I'm basically creating a gradient by dragging the paint and lifting the brush slowly. Again, I'm going to be able to go back in and strengthen some of these marks if I want later on. They don't have to all be, I don't have to push them as far as they're going to go in the final painting at this moment. So I want to set the stage first, see how these values look, and then I'll decide if some of these things need to be darkened or if I can leave them just at this value. Again, just dropping this off.
Question for you, Kevin.
Yes.
Do you find that you need to add more linseed oil to your old paint once you have broken through the skin?
It depends. Depends how much paint is down, how if the paint inside has started to stiffen up. But look, I will work with the paint based on what it is. If the paint is a little stiff, I'll loosen it with some linseed oil. And if it's not, I don't. I don't go into it with an expectation of having to thin it further. I go into it with an open mind just to see what I get. And then I go from there. And I'm redrawing these shapes as I go. Anything that I don't like the shape that's happened as I've kind of moved the paint around, I fix it. I don't accept something that's not right. I just go in and I make a correction. I have to go down to a smaller brush for some of these marks. Something relatively fine. And like these fine brushes, if they don't hold a point, they're useless. Don't try to make the brush. If it's not going to hold a point for you, just get rid of it. Don't try to make it, don't try to take a brush that's not holding its shape properly and try to make it do refined work, right? These marks, some of these marks are refined. And so I don't want to risk making a sloppy mark or a clumsy mark because the brush isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It's my fault if I put a bad mark on the painting. I can say, well, it was the brush. The brush wasn't doing what it's supposed to do, but I'm the one who decided to work with the brush even when I saw that it was a problem. And so, you know, you're ultimately responsible for every mark that goes onto your painting. And so don't allow stuff in your painting that you don't want in your painting. I think that's actually a really big thing. You know, I talk about that in the school a lot where, say like, you know, a student will say, well, this didn't work out. And it's like, well, like you didn't work it out. That's a different thing, right? Be responsible. The painting doesn't make itself. The painting sits there quietly and you select colors and values and you put them up there and you deal with the edges. And so the painting is in its entirety, when it's finished, it is just a collection of your decisions. How much focus, how much care, right? And so the painting doesn't do anything, you do everything. When you start taking responsibility for that as an artist, every mark on the canvas is your responsibility. If it's not right, it's you. It's not the brush, it's not the paint, it's not the panel, it's you. You have to figure out how to resolve it. Like you see me, the materials I'm working with, because I'm not accustomed to these materials, they're tripping me up, right? You see that, a couple of these paintings. I don't just throw my hands up back, well, I can't do anything with this. I figure it out. I'm responsible to make this painting. My name's gonna go on it. And so it's my responsibility to resolve everything in the painting to the quality that I expect from myself. Doesn't matter who you are, you have an expectation of what you should be doing, what you can deliver. Always deliver at that quality. Take the responsibility. Right? Once you accept the responsibility for something, you'll be much better at it. When you're not responsible for the end result of something, and this is in everything, I think, it's human nature to not worry so much about the end result. But if the end result, if you take full responsibility for it, it's something very different. Some of these places, I quiet down a little bit as I get in here and work. I need to be able to focus on what I'm doing. For all the amount of paint coming off the brush, looking at the shapes of these things, trying to be as precise as possible. Again, making art is about controlling the materials. An intent, you know what you want, then you have to have a command over the material to make the paint do what you want it to do. A little bit more right here.
Kevin, it's pretty cool to see how quickly this face is coming together with just a few marks, really.
Yeah, it's just, again, you know, I'm making value decisions now. Again, one of our moving parts. I'm making value decisions, and those value decisions are creating contrasts that we're missing. And once I get these done, I'm gonna bulk them up a little bit, get some slightly darker values. I had to soften a few edges, and then I'll go in and I'm probably gonna open up the shadows a little bit, start putting some of these shades in the shadows. Like this one's not so dark. Maybe open it up a little bit so you can see a little bit more of what's going on in there. Maybe the side of the mouth too, or down in here. I make that decision kind of as I go. But all of those things are going to contribute to rounding the head out and creating the impression of light bouncing off a hard surface. And again, I want it to feel a little see-through because I want this to feel like it's kind of ghosted in this space. I don't want it to feel too solid. So I have to be careful about how much I do in here. But to me, this shadow under the eye right now is kind of ugly. And so I don't care what I decided I was going to do as far as leaving the shadows empty. If it's ugly, I don't want it in my painting, so I'm going to make an adjustment there. This is actually quite beautiful at the moment. I don't know if I want to make a change to it. I may just put the dark bit of the lip in here and leave it alone. I'll kind of see as I get to it and start playing with it. But again, I'm making decisions on the fly as I'm working here, anticipating what's to come. Again, like opening up the shadows, and so I'm trying to plan for what could be, kind of not being absolutely like rigid in my thinking, but being flexible and saying, if I get this, then I'll do that. If I get that, then I'll do something else. Kind of looking at, I have an expectation of where this is going to go, and then I'll see if it goes there. And again, experience is a very big part of this. I have a good sense of where it's going because I've done this many, many, many times. And again, not this painting, not painted this way, but enough paintings like it. And again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to soften some of these things after. I want to get this value in place first. And get it placed everywhere, and then I'll go from there. Again, I'm just looking, it's very subtle in here. Get up a little bit closer on this to see my transfer. And again, like I'm utilizing my transfer still as much as I can. I mean, there are some places where I'm having to actually just draw it freehand, having to figure out what's going on based on what's already down and figure out where these edges belong. Some of the things I can still see the transfer, some I can't. I'm going to take advantage of that transfer as much as I can. The whole point of putting it is to be able to use it, to be able to lean on it a little bit, to to not have to draw the stuff freehand, because if you draw it freehand, there is always the chance that you're putting in something in the wrong place. And again, the transfer doesn't take the place of being able to draw, but it definitely does make some of this easier, that you don't have to worry. You know everything is anchored. When you do the transfer, you know you put the marks where they belong. You can trust them later in the process if you need to. There's really something to be said for that, to not have to sweat where something goes. That you know that the mark that you have down in your transfer is telling you where it belongs. You don't have to really think about it. You can really spend your energy. Figuring out what value you want to put down and what color you want to put down and what the edge needs to be, rather than trying to figure out where the marks go. And again, I don't endorse the idea of not having the ability to do this stuff freehand. That's a big mistake. Working from photographs if you work from photographs, it doesn't mean you can ignore that skill set. That skill set, being able to work from direct observation, is critical to being an artist. I can tell you, I didn't develop it until later in my career. So I'm speaking from experience, how important it is. I built a career as an illustrator, and I didn't know how to work from life. And my paintings were flat, and there were all kinds of issues with them because I never learned how to see with my eyes the way that you see when you work from direct observation. So, very important to be able to do everything. Makes a big difference.
Yeah. Got a question for you, Kevin.
Yes.
Are there areas of the head you find more difficult or tedious to paint than others?
No. We talk about this a lot. We say, painting is painting. I'm making value and color and edge decisions, and that's all I'm doing the whole time I'm working. So I'm not thinking it's an eye, I'm not thinking it's a nose or a nostril, I'm just looking at the shapes of things, and I'm getting the right value and placing it in the space and managing the edges. That's all I'm doing, and I'm doing that for everything. This portion of the face is no different than this portion or this portion or this portion, where that's concerned. And this is really, once you really know what you're doing, you don't see the eye as an eye. You see it as you see it for its shapes, for its values, for its colors, for the edges that connect each of these things. And once you see that, it equalizes all of these things. Like an eye is no different than a nose or a cheek, right? And yet a cheek appears to have almost nothing going on. The nose is nowhere near as complex as the eye. But I don't see them as one being complicated and one being simple. They're all just color, value, edge decisions, right? And when you get to that point, all art becomes much easier to manage, right? And that's the goal. The goal is to get to a point where you have a system that equalizes the complexity of all subjects underneath the umbrella of your skill set.
And another question for you.
Yes.
How often do you paint from imagination and without a reference?
Well, these days, not at all. In the olden days when I was an illustrator, all the time. There was never an illustration that went by that didn't have something that was just pure imagination in it. For many, many years, every painting I did had something in it that was purely imagination, no reference at all. And so, but again, I don't do illustration. I don't do science fiction illustration anymore. So those days are behind me.
What would you say are some of the challenges that come with painting from imagination versus having a reference?
Well, so if you're painting from your imagination, you really need to understand how light works. Because what you're painting is you're painting light and shadow. And if you don't understand what they do, how they work, how they move around an object, then you're going to have a hard time bringing something to life, because you're not representing a dragon if you paint a dragon. You're representing how the light bounces off the dragon. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't understand how that works, not the dragon, but the light, if you don't understand how the light works, you can't paint the dragon, because you don't see the dragon, you see the light. That's just how our eyes work. We don't see things, we see the light that bounces off of them. And so understanding how that works will inform you as to how to manage something that's not real. You have to understand. And again, this is where the value of painting from direct observation comes in, right? Because, boy, this is the end of the painting for the night. So we don't look with our eye and hold information in our eye, and then somehow it springs to our hand and we paint. We see something with our eye, and our brain takes that information and creates an image. That image is now in our head. When you paint, you're painting from memory, not from what you see, right? And so it's always painting from memory, whether you do it from direct observation, from a photograph, or from your imagination. So I always talk about paintings, being an artist is about intent. So I have absolutely no respect for anybody who creates art by randomly throwing things at a canvas and waiting to see what happens. Because there's no intent in that. That's just waiting to see its luck and its gravity and its whatever else is in the mix. But there's no intent once the bucket of paint leaves the artist's hand. And there may be some level of understanding and intent for an artist. Like I've seen art where they spin these things, and it's like if you do enough of it, I guess you start to get a sense of what happens when you do certain things, and so there can be some intent built into that. But for the most part, it's just random and it's luck. And so to me, that's not making art. Art is about having an intent. And so if you're doing something from your imagination, you have to be able to see it clearly in your head. And you cannot see something clearly in your head if you don't understand how the thing works, right? You can't imagine something that is beyond your imagination or beyond your understanding, right? And so if I asked you to, close your eyes and picture a dog, but you've never seen a dog, you wouldn't know. If you've never looked at a dog's leg and see where the knee is and how the leg goes down and the heel and the length of the foot and then the little toes, right? If you've looked at a dog's leg and you understand how it connects to a human leg, like where the toes are, the length of the foot, where the heel is, right? The parts are all basically the same, but they're different shapes and sizes. But the anatomy is similar enough. And if you can make the connection between a human leg from the hip to the toes, and then see how that relates to a dog's body from the hip to the knee, to the heel, to the toes, in your imagination, you could now pull something together and create, based on an understanding of that anatomy, to whatever degree you have it, and an intent to produce something based on it. But if you don't know what an animal like a dog's leg looks like, how it works, how can you imagine so that you can put something together solid in your head to give you an intent to then paint? And the answer is you can't, right? And so in order to be able to formulate what you have in your head and get it out as something painting purely from your imagination, you have to have data in here for the thing you want to paint. Again, you want to paint a nighttime sky. It's not truly imagination. You have reference. You've been looking at nighttime skies your entire life. Some of them have beautiful sunsets in them. Some of them are really kind of hazy and cast over because you live near a city and there's all kinds of light pollution. If you live out in the middle of nowhere, the night is absolutely black and the stars are brilliant, right? So you have information, you have data in here. And your mind will rifle through that mental Rolodex of data, information that you've accumulated just by having eyes in your head, and help you to formulate. But what do you do with it once you know what you want to do? You have to have a language to get it out of here and onto here. And that language is your education in art. Without that education, it's just nothing. It's just mumbling. You can't take what you see in your head and get it here. And again, it's no different if you work from life, because the information has to be in here. You have to get it through your eyes into your brain and understand it before you can tell your hand what to paint. If you work from a photograph, it goes from here to your eye, to your brain. You have to figure out what it is you want to do, and then you have to paint it. And it's the same if there's nothing out here, you don't use your eyes, you simply use your imagination. It's the same process minus this piece of reference, or the piece of reference on a table. The reference is purely memory from a time ago, whether it's a nighttime sky or a sunset you saw or a beautiful beach scene. It's purely memory. The more you understand about the thing you were looking at, the easier it is to paint. Again, if you don't know anything about how waves break on the shore, it would be very hard to paint from your memory, or what you think of as imagination, water breaking on the shore, right? There's science behind that. It has to do with sound waves. And so having an understanding about the subject matter allows you to be informed. So what you have in your head, you can then use your knowledge as an artist, using your paint or whatever materials you work with, to then get it out of your head and faithfully represent what you intend on your painting. I don't even remember what the question was, but I think
great.
I answered it.
Yeah.
I think I answered it somewhere along the way.
I mean, we could keep going.
No, I gotta paint.
Okay.
Gotta paint.
Well, there is another question.
Yes,
Different topic.
that's fine.
So did you, for your illustrations, back when you were doing them all the time, did you
Yes.
research outfits for your characters to wear and reference them in your paintings?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When I did illustration work, well, first of all, the the authors described what it was people were wearing, but and again, if you're doing science fiction stuff, you have lots of latitude, right? Because the stuff doesn't really exist. So you do things like this. You get things in the real world. You know, they say the best lies have some truth in them, right? The more truth there is in a lie, the more believable the lie is, right? And so when we make somebody look futuristic, if we dress them in a pair of, of jeans, like very particular jeans, like let's say bedazzled jeans, that's something you would have seen in like the late 80s. You know exactly when that painting was done. But if you put them in something that doesn't feel locked into a certain time, and then you kind of fancy it up and add some elements to it that might be imaginative, all of a sudden you take this thing that is timeless, add something that feels futuristic, and the whole costume moves along. It all feels like it's futuristic. And so I'm not going to do that with this. I think that this uniform is fine just the way it is. It looks futuristic enough that it doesn't require anything more. I can leave it, I can paint it just the way it is. But when I did book covers, if I did something like this, and I use paintball gear all the time. Paintball had just come out a little while after I had started my illustration career, and it was a wonderful resource for materials, guns and armor and everything else. And I did a number of paintings over the years that were like, one brand, like one company, I was just advertising their product. Not intentionally, it's just they had good stuff. And so I would go and I would load up on their material. I had a storehouse of different helmets and chest plates and shin guards and all these different things. And not just that, you can get armor. I did one painting years ago where I rented armor from a company that designed armor for Broadway, for shows on Broadway. I rented a samurai armor that was used in Shogun. And it was great. It was beautiful. It looked real. It was lightweight. It was like some kind of like rubbery plastic, but it looked like bamboo. It was incredible. And it was beautifully ornamented. And so like you have that, and it's like you don't have to invent. There are people out there who are making the stuff you would want for this. Just track them down. Even like if you were doing, knights in armor, there are places where you can rent armor, like real metal armor. There are people who make it, chainmail, and you just have to look them up. You have to find them.
Rhiannon, who asked that question, said, "Oh wow, I would have asked to take pictures so it was cheaper." LOL.
No, well, the thing is, again, like, when you're doing it professionally, you spend the money. You're being paid. You're being paid to produce something really beautiful. Your name goes on it, right? And so you produce the best thing you can, and that requires getting a hold of some of these things, like I said, like armor. And so you do it. It's part of the job. And you think of it that way. You don't mind the expense. And a lot of the companies cover expenses for reasonable things. Not everything, but reasonable things. They'll cover your photo shoot. They'll cover model expenses, things like that. You don't have to have a professional photo studio in your home in order to be a professional illustrator. It certainly helps. But a lot of the publishing companies will cover the expense of a photo shoot done at a studio in New York City. If you need to have a photo shoot done. I shouldn't say they do. They used to. I don't know. I don't know what they do now. I imagine they still do. But, times change. Anyway, so I've got all this stuff down. I'm going to go in with a clean brush, and I'm just going to soften some of these edges. And again, you can see just trying to keep everything nice and clean. I want the edges that I want soft, I want them nice and soft. I want them to dissolve. These are just minor variations, the stuff I just put down, minor variations against what's already here as a shadow. Once I've got this done, I'm then going to go and I'm going to punch up some of the shadows a little bit, make them a little bit stronger to get the variations between them. So I have more than one shade explaining a shadow that, in my opinion, has more than one shade in it. Again, we keep talking about this. Values, colors, edges. I have a value color decision down, and I'm now just manipulating edges, making sure that I don't have a sharp edge where I should have a gradient. I don't have a gradient where I should have a sharp edge. All I'm doing, dissolving edges. Like all the edges went down, they were pretty sharp. So now all I'm doing is taking some of the sharp edges away. I'm going to go a little bit darker, so I'm just going to put a little bit less medium in the paint now. Go in and strengthen a few of these areas. Careful not to overdo it. Easy enough to overshoot the mark.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Does your hand ever get fatigued? How long can you paint before you must take a break?
Yeah, I mean, of course, my hand gets tired. I don't know. I mean, generally speaking, I realize I'm tired after I'm done painting at the end of the night. I don't feel it until I'm done, and I realize I've been painting. Again, I don't do much these days, but like if I work 10 hours, my hand will be a little stiff the next day, and not bad, but I'll know that I was painting the day before.
Shelley was sharing that she says, I have a limit for sitting or holding small things, and then I must move. It's not always at a convenient time.
No, and look, I mean, you don't force it. If you can only work for a certain amount of time, then work for a certain amount of time and then stop. Like, doesn't make sense to make it an awful experience just so that you can get a little bit more work done. I mean, I have like lower back issues, so there's a limit to how much time I can sit in this chair or stand in front of an easel and work. So I can only do so much, and so when it's time to stop, it's time to stop, and my body will tell me. And for the most part, I pay attention because if I don't, there's a penalty to pay for that. I pay for it later that day or I pay for it the next day. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that it's not worth it. So I listen to my body. If my body tells me to stop, I stop. Let me rephrase that. I'm getting better at listening. I don't actually listen. I'm getting better at listening because I pay the price way too often. I push myself. I feel like I can do anything. If I want to work, I just work. But I pay for it. I pay for it. And like when I did the Grandmaster portrait, we were doing 4-hour days because I didn't want to be on my feet. I was in too much pain. Actually, I think I mentioned this, but I had just, when I was painting that portrait, I had torn my L5 S1 disc and I herniated my L3 L4 only like a month earlier. And so like I was on my feet, I could only do about 4 hours at a time. It was rough. But I was limited, and I was smart enough. We limited those days. We had a couple of days we ran over, but most days we kept it to 4 hours.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
I can't help but notice your forearm muscle moving when you're making those fine touches with the paintbrush. What muscle is that? It's like in the center of...
Oh, back in here.
Yeah.
I don't remember offhand. I don't really know. There's a number of muscles in your forearm, and they help you to move your hand. So I mean, this is all I'm basically doing, pulling my hand back. So rather than moving my arm, I'm just moving my hand.
Do you do that for a specific reason, or like...
It gives me more control, right? Pulling the brush, if I move my arm over and over and over like this, it's hard to control it. But if I anchor my hand against the board, and then I work, right? My hand's not moving, it's resting. It's just small movements, I can control them better. And especially if I'm trying to pick up some speed along the way, it becomes these kind of repetitive movements.
Mm-hmm. Cool to see.
And I'm just looking at my edges now, trying to make sure all of my edges are managed. I don't want anything to dry with an unintended edge, meaning sharp where it should be graded or graded where it should be sharp. You can see, I mean, the face pulled together pretty nicely, even like this. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to go in, I'm going to open up this shadow a little bit, maybe a little bit up in here. Possibly this. Actually, I think I'm going to leave this. If I open up this, it starts forcing my hand up in here. And I really want to kind of leave this alone. So I've got to figure out, back here with one of my darker shades. And again, I'm just going to break it open, pull paint out here. You can see I thin it down. I want it to be a little bit, I've got solid coverage, so I don't need it to be very thick. I just want a little bit of paint. I want to see how this looks when I put it down here, value-wise. So it's a little bit lighter than the shadow, and that's all I need. This allows me to add a little bit more character inside of these shadows. And now I've got two values here. I'm trying to marry this edge a little. I'm trying to push this out. I may even go a little bit lighter, but it's a good base.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Cindy said, to a certain extent, I get what's being said, yet I really don't know how to see shapes and contrast in light and shadow. I believe the class would help me understand better.
If you're talking about evolve as a class, yes, that's what the class does. It's what the training does. It teaches you how to see. Right? Because learning how to see, it's something you have to be taught. You don't open your eyes. It's not that you open your eyes and you can just see. It doesn't actually work that way. Or let me rephrase that. You open your eyes and you can see, but you see the world passively. You walk through the world blind to its beauty. What training does is turns you into an active viewer. Everything that you see makes sense. You break it down in ways that you don't even see those things right now. Like most people have no idea about temperature. They stand outside and they look at the warm sidewalk over here in the light and the blue sidewalk over here in the shadows and don't recognize the difference. They just think one is light and one is dark, right? One's in light and one's in shadow. That's if they're even thinking of that. But even if you think like that, until you've been trained to see the temperature shifts, trained to understand that shadows lack color, lights have color, right? Because the color isn't in the objects, it's in the light source, the sun. So if the sun is shining on something, it has lots and lots of color. And if the sun isn't shining on it, meaning it's in a shadow, the light source, which has all the color in it, isn't imparting colors to those other areas. And so relatively speaking, the shadows look gray and the lights look colorful. Right? And it's like you have to be trained to see that stuff. I can tell you, and once you see it, you'll never stop seeing it. But the more you work with it, the greater your understanding of it will become. And it empowers you. It empowers you. And I can tell you, like, even if you only had the ability to see these things for the sake of being able to see them, the world becomes incredibly beautiful. I mean, people walk around blind to the beauty of the world. I mean, it's such an incredible thing when you, there are times, and I'm not one for like getting caught up in moments, but I can tell you, like, when a storm rolls through in the middle of the day, like towards sunset, storm rolls through and I know it's going by and the sun is setting, I will stop what I'm doing and go outside. I want to see, there's nothing more beautiful as far as I'm concerned as the dark gray clouds kind of moving to the east as the sun is setting. You get this golden light against these very cold blues in the sky. It is stunning. It's worth dropping whatever you're doing to go outside and watch. You don't see them very often because it's got to happen. You've got to go from a storm to a clear sky at sunset. But when it happens, like I said, it is worth dropping whatever you're in the middle of to go stand outside and just drink it in. And there are lots of things like that in the world. You just walk by. Again, I think it's great just looking at the color of a shadow and a light on a piece of asphalt. I mean, it's incredible, like, how much information is there. And it can sound silly, but once you start seeing the grander things, even the little things become incredible. They're just, because it's in everything. Everything that light touches is like magic. And as an artist, that once you've been trained, you get to see all of it. right? You get to like stand behind the magician while they're doing their trick and see how it works. It's a pretty cool thing. I sound like a lunatic.
No, I mean that's honestly like my heart is like, rising up in my chest because that's just like I am one who does take in moments, and that's like the heart of why I love being a part of all of this and like helping others see this because it's yeah, like Kevin, you do sound insane, but also like I'm with you because it's
Have
just
I ever dragged you
incredible.
outside during one of those when a storm rolls through? I've done that
we
at the school.
no.
Dragged like half a class outside. You have to see this.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's just so many things, and it's yeah. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It makes me so happy. I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah. as the number of viewers drops
Yeah.
precipitously. Look at
Right.
the lunatics.
Yeah.
I'm actually not going to do very much there. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to soften it a little bit. I just wanted to open this up so that the light feels like it kind of rolls across. I don't want it to be like these hard breaks everywhere. So I'm very, very gently just kind of dusting over what's here, trying to break up the shapes a little bit so that they're not so hard. I don't mind it being as hard down here, but up in here I want a little bit more softness. And I'm trying not to cover all this stuff. I want some of this background to show through. Be careful not to overdo it. Very easy for this stuff to just take over and for me to wipe out everything, just literally paint everything. Very easy to do that. And so I want to be careful not to. And again, I'm back and forth referencing the photograph. Everything in here is soft. She's a beautiful young girl. I don't want to make like hard edges on her unnecessarily. I want to keep her beauty in this. So I'd rather err on the side of being a little too soft and being a little too hard on some of these edges.
Well, Kevin, you can rest assured that we're all in good company here. Maybe we're all lunatics, or nobody is. A lot of people are sharing that they've seen those kinds of skies before. Unicorns and dodos said. We love these usernames that come through. We had that sky here when a quick storm passed by, and then the light was below the gray lavender clouds today. And I did go outside to stare for a while. From Cindy, my husband says this, he loves storms. I love that funky light that comes sometimes before a storm. It's almost a sepia color. Rhiannon said, yeah, I'm with Kevin on that. There are certain moments that I wait for.
And, another thing, like, this is one of
much.
my favorite things, and this is not art, but this is just if you understand things, right? So when we go outside, well, I guess it's art related, right? We have what's called atmospheric perspective. You look out, like, say, a mile away, and everything is diffused. The edges are all soft, the colors are muted, the contrasts are not so great. And what it is that between you and that thing that's a mile away is a mile worth of dust in the air. And so everything is diffused. If you go outside just before a lightning storm, the electrical current in the air ionizes the dust. So if you've ever stood outside just before a storm rolls in, before the rain, like this is the kind of thing you do in like Arizona, where it's like you've got, it's not raining. The storm, the rain, the lightning, it all comes in a wall, right? So you get this electrical current that ionizes all the dust, so there's no dust in the air. It's all glued to the ground. And you can see a mile away with the same level of clarity and color and contrast as something right in your hand. It's incredible. And it's like, most people, they see the clarity and they're like, wow, it's so clear, but they have no idea why. And it's like when we paint, we never paint that way. We always want to add the dust. We want to add the dust because it refracts and bounces light and diffuses everything. And it tells our brain that that thing is far away because it's not got as much contrast. The edges are softer. But it's the dust in the air that does that. And so like for me, again, like seeing like when a lightning storm comes in and the rain comes in with the lightning, right? That it's just, if once it's raining, you don't see it. But it's got to be dry when that lightning comes rolling in. It's a pretty cool thing also. Okay, so in here, I've noticed that I'm getting a little bit too much blue. It's a different color of blue. So I'm going to add it in a couple of places just so that it doesn't feel alone. I don't think that would look very good if it was just by itself up there. It's just a subtle shift, but it's enough that it's bothering me. And so I want to try to impart it in a couple of other areas along this edge so that it's not alone. It feels like it's meant to be in here, that it's not contrived. I didn't just throw it in accidentally. So I'm going to drop a little bit of it down in here. And again, this is just doing the work on the fly. Like as you go, if you need to do something, if you think something's going to improve the painting, you jump in and do it. All right, and I'm referencing the photograph back and forth, looking at the photo as I go. Lots of information here, stuff for me to play with. And I'm putting down a very small amount of paint. I mean, barely any paint is coming off the brush. But it's enough to flavor the canvas a little bit. Make sure that color doesn't stand alone. And again, this is going to give a little bit more dimension to the face on this side. It wasn't my original intention to do it. I was happy to leave the face a little bit more flat so that it was more transparent, but it's okay. My hand is being forced a little bit by this color shift. I don't mind. I think I'm going to stop right there with that. Everything is soft. And again, I'm just making sure that it's present everywhere. If it's just in one place, it looks contrived, and I don't want that. Now that I've got that done, I'm now going to move over to the light side of things. I'm going to roll through these lights, not going crazy, just bringing out a few highlights. And then I'm going to get into the hair. I want to get the hair blocked in very quickly. I'm going to leave it relatively loose. I don't want to get bogged down, for 2 hours painting hair. I want to just move through it very quickly. I'm not sure what value is going to work on top of the skin to read as a highlight. So let's do a quick test. I believe this was the light that we put down. So this might not actually read as a highlight. We'll see. Actually, it's looking pretty light. Yeah, actually, it's looking lighter than I want. So grab a little bit of this darker shade. Guess I'll work with this. Try to keep it a little bit on the thin side, and then I'm just going to blend my edges out once I've got it down. These are going to give me some obviously really strong highlights, which is okay. It's going to give me, it's going to round out her face a lot, which is fine. Again, the photograph is going to have probably higher contrast or lower contrast than the painting. It's okay. I'm trying to be gentle with this, not put too much down. I'm going to push it around after I'm done, and that's going to thin it out quite a bit. And again, you can see I'm running out of paint on the brush, and I'm actually happier with the value that's coming off the brush now. So I'm not going back and getting more paint. I'm just working with this. Oh, I got to grab a little bit more paint to get a clean edge in here. I want to put in that dark line in here. So I put the highlight in, and the highlight does a lot of the job for me. Again, I'm picking and choosing. I'm not filling everything that looks like a highlight. I am picking and choosing very carefully where I'm putting this stuff. This is just for effect. It's going to give me a nice little pop in the painting, round her out, and I'll be able to move on. If I start covering everything that's this valley, that's lighter, it's going to take me forever. And so I'm just looking for places where it's going to have a nice impact. And again, this is experience. I know, like I've done enough paintings, I have a sense of where I should be putting stuff, where to put stuff, where to not put stuff, how much to put down, how much I can blend away. You know, I have a lot of that information in my head. And again, not that it's a guarantee. I don't know because I've never done this painting before, but my experience will be very helpful in making sure that I get the painting to where I want it to be, that it doesn't become, it doesn't get out of control or out of my control.
Ellie just shared, my granddaughter wanted me to tell you that your daughter is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. She'll love to hear that. Again, like you said, I get quiet. I'm like calculating here. So I need to be in my own head kind of thinking. Like if I were asked a question, I'd be able to answer it. But like without a question, my mind is completely engrossed in what I'm doing here. Trying to make sense of where these lights, where these things go, what spaces do they fit in, where are they necessary? So I'm just going to go and I'm going to blend this stuff out. And again, I say blend, I'm looking for, most of these are going to be soft edges, but some of them are a little on the sharp side, so I'm just going to be thoughtful about that. But But I'm just thinking edges. I put this paint down. I'm just thinking edges now. How soft do they have to be? They're going to be different levels of softness depending on which edge I'm dealing with. So I want to make sure at least some of the paint in the middle of the stroke stays intact if I can help it. If I push around too much, I'm going to lose the value that I just put down, meaning the new brighter shade is going to dissolve into the canvas. And I don't want that. I want the shade to be visible. And so, careful not to wipe it away. It's very easy to put it down and then just blend it until it's no longer present, because there's not a lot of paint, right? Some of these, like this, I want to dissolve this. I want this barely visible, but other areas, I want that light to really show, right? This is just her jawline in here. It's a very, very subtle difference, but it is there. And so I wanted to get that little bit of light so that from here to here wasn't one shade. But this does have to be softened on all sides, really kind of knocked down. So this is now lighter than this, just subtly so. And with this is going to be very soft. Careful not to wipe out the darker shades around it as I move it around. And again, I'm referencing the photograph as I'm going. Don't stop referencing this. Blending these edges, I keep looking over here to see what's going on in this area so that I'm trying to faithfully represent it, at least to the degree that I can. Here I'm going to try to stay out of that area and just work the outer edges. Smooth this out. Bottom edge of this, just blur it away. This and this I want to keep nice and solid, but the rest of this can be blurred.
Got a question for you.
Yes.
Are you making her look older on purpose, or is it just because you're not using the finishing, you're not in the finishing part of it yet?
You know what? The truth is, I don't really care if she looks older or not. I'm not doing a portrait. I'm making a painting of a face. This face will look like this face, close enough. That's all I'm doing. This is not a portrait commission, so I'm just painting a face. I'm not worried about how precise it is. It's one small piece of an otherwise larger painting. And so, yeah, it's not really a focus. As long as it looks like her in both places, it's all that matters. And what's making her look older is like all these hard edges. Right? Because, you know, when we're young, all this collagen fills this stuff in, and as we get older, we get drawn in. And so you're seeing more bone structure and more value shifts from light to dark, light to dark, light to dark, and that makes her look deeper. Her eyes are deeper set because of how they're painted instead of the depth from here to here feeling a little bit less deep. But that's all it is. And again, this is just kind of ghosted into the background. I'm not really worried about, again, I'm not trying to produce a portrait. It's not really my focus in this painting. In this painting, I'm just trying to get a face in here that looks like the same girl in both places. Right? Again, if this were an actual book cover, I have no idea what the author, outside of a general description, I have no idea what the author intended. And so I could only generalize, right? I don't know exactly, unless I'm doing a book and there's a movie and we've got actors and I've got to represent them. But under normal circumstances, doing like a book cover, all you have is a written description of the subjects, and then you have to figure out what they look like from there. So, and your photo reference is never, it's not part of the deal. It's only the final painting, right? So people only see the final result. They don't know who modeled for this. And again, like, obviously I want it to look like her, but I'm not sweating every little detail. We have limited time, and I want to get the painting done. So the likeness is really secondary to getting the painting done and making her three-dimensional and like turning it into a good solid painting, right? That's the focus. Everything else is secondary to that. So it's a good question. It's a good question. Again, when I first started doing illustration work, I was so hung up on getting even the models to look exactly the way they did in my photo shoots, and it was so much labor for no reason, because I was the only one that cared. Didn't make a difference to anybody else. And so it was wasted time and energy that could have been spent someplace else. Yeah, that's good. And I think I'm going to leave it just like that. I think the face is basically done. I'm going to soften this edge on the nose just a little bit. Pull this over. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the face just like that. Again, just trying to make sure that I'm not leaving any unnecessarily harsh edges. Being told that my daughter is beautiful to then like butcher her face. Not very nice. So, I think we're looking pretty good there. Let's light in also. Seeing I've got a couple of lights on this side that I can put in. Three-dimensional nature of what we've got going on here. I'm going to step this up a little bit on the other side and bring up those lights a little bit, just a little bit out here. Again, just very carefully picking and choosing a couple of marks. I don't want to go too crazy here. Keep it real simple so this feels a little bit more illuminated side.
Another question.
Yes.
When photographing my assignments, I noticed things that I had not seen by the naked eye. If you know a painting is to be printed, do you check what it looks like in a photo before finishing it off?
So, no, I never did. What I would do is I would view the painting using a reducing glass, right? And so that gives me a better sense of what the painting will look like reduced. And I go with that. I mean, I know if the painting is done well. I know if there are any problems in it. And wouldn't ever deliver something that had problems. Right? And again, as a student, it's a little bit different. You're trying to figure it out. But as a pro, I know exactly what I'm doing and what the deliverable has to be. So I know what it, like, after you do enough book covers and things like that, you know what the final painting has to look like, what the quality of it is, in order for it to be an acceptable, deliverable product to a publishing company. And so you deliver that quality. And you can see, like, as when you're building your career, you get your first book cover back after it's been published, and you can see, oh, that didn't print very well. This printed really well, that didn't. And you start to make sense of it as a painter, which techniques you use that you really like that print well, and which ones maybe you want to avoid a little bit because they don't print as well. Like glazing. Glazing doesn't print very well. It's a beautiful thing in a painting, but it doesn't print very well. And so you have to be thoughtful about that if you're going to be glazing in your work. Step back away from this. I just want to take a look at it from a few feet back. Yeah, so she's come to life pretty well. A few things to knock down. And again, getting out of the chair gives me a much better view. This edge is too sharp. This is too sharp as well. Just got to knock it down a little bit. Carry this to the shadow a little bit. A little bit too strong in there. And that should actually do. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to move on to the hair. So now I'm going to, actually just blend out the ear a little bit too. Now the hair, I want to really kind of move through the hair quickly. Try to keep it quick and simple. So like I said, I did an outline. I'm going to go and I'm going to glaze in the darker areas, and then I'll drop in a few lights, and hopefully between the tone of the canvas, the few darks I put in, a few highlights, that it pulls together and it does the job for me. Again, I'm not looking to paint a lot of hair, and it's not a portrait. She's supposed to be just kind of out there in the background. I don't want her to become too much of a focal point, but I do want to make sure that all of this stuff is accounted for.
Hey, Kevin,
Yeah.
what medium are you using with your paint right now?
I am using a seed oil and
Thank you.
yep, it's a 5-to-1, 5 oil, 1 alkyd. So what it does is it dries overnight, so I don't get a lot of dust and everything in it. It dries quickly, but it stays wet long enough to work. Like I think alkyds can dry a little too fast, and so they can actually cause problems as you're trying to work if you're taking a long time on something. And so I like to have a mixture where I get the benefits of both, the open nature of the oil, but the overnight drying of the alkyd. Okay, so this is line. So now I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, well, all these lines that I have, and again, transfer is great, but at some point you have to figure out what your transfer means, right? And so now I'm looking at my transfer, I'm trying to figure out what it means, what each of these marks are. And a maul stick would be good now to steady my hand as I'm working. Not absolutely necessary, but it would be helpful. Like, again, these are not details to me. The details are going to happen down here. She's just a ghost. And so I'm not overly concerned about these things down in here, how precise they are. They will do their job. We're going to have stars and everything in here anyway. It's going to break a lot of this up.
Hey, Kevin, there is actually a maul stick on that table to the left of you. If you want me, I can grab it for you.
I can get it.
Okay.
I think I'm okay. Just
Okay.
thank you though. Just trying to figure out what's in this photograph, what each of these things is. Right? When you make your transfer, you know, the drawing is sitting right there. You know, like you're drawing on top of it. It's easy to lose track of, if you're not thoughtful about everything, what it is that you're denoting as you make all of your marks. This is cut. I have another photograph here. Again, this is going to be blue space. I'm just looking here. This is armor. Now I'm using a little bit of this blue outlining the outside of the hair out here. This is all going to be lighter. So I'm just getting a slightly darker shade and I'm just going to pull that away. Now I've got my dark shadows in here and I've got my lights now kind of cordoned off. I want to blend this outer edge so it dissolves into the background, into space. Even going to knock this edge down while I'm at it. Right, I don't want this edge to be too strong. I want to see the structure of her head, but I don't need this to be really, really tightly defined. Soften that edge. Helps to give me a little bit more distance from this figure to here. Right, everything in here is still very soft. How are we on time?
It is 9:20.
Okay. So I'm going to move over to here.
Got a question from Rob.
Yes.
What's the history of how the Evolve School and program started?
So, about 14 years ago, I did the whole stay-at-home dad thing. My job as a portrait painter allowed me a lot of flexibility, and so I stayed home with my first daughter when she was born, and then when my second daughter was born, I continued to stay home. And when my older one was getting to the age where it was time to start looking at school, it became important for me to now get serious about getting back to work. I mean, I was doing portrait work, but I wasn't out of town every week. I wasn't going crazy. I kind of hunkered down, and I was taking just multiple figure paintings and working them in the evenings and on the weekends. And so when my older daughter was getting ready to go to school, I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do. And so I could have gone back to doing portrait work full time, which would have had me out of town, 3 weekends a month. I would have been gone a lot. And when I was home, I would have been busy painting. And so I decided I wanted to do something a little bit closer to home. And as I thought about it, I thought opening an art school would be the way to go. Sharing what I had figured. I'd always planned that. From way back at the very beginning of my career, it was important to me, once I became knowledgeable, to share what I had. Very, very important to me, all the way from the very beginning. Even before I was a pro, as I was learning, I even talked about it with people who were helping me along the way. And so I decided to open a school. It would keep me close to home. And so I opened a school in my town. The school was there for about 10 years when I got maybe about 8 years, when I got a phone call from one of my friends, the guy who taught me how to paint, Dorian Vallejo. He was in the middle of a podcast. He just finished a podcast with Mitch Bowler for Pencil Kings. And Mitch had asked him if he knew anybody in art education, that maybe he should consider speaking with. And so Dorian said, well, you should speak with my friend Kevin. Kevin's an educator. He's got an interesting approach to this stuff. And so Mitch at the time, he had been trying to build a curriculum of foundations. And he was looking to see what was out there. Because with Pencil Kings, he was giving kind of advanced education, but there were no core fundamentals, which is what he was looking at, the real fundamentals, like what we do in Evolve. And so he looked at my website. He was surprised. He couldn't believe it was real. He actually eventually, like a week after our interview, he flew down to New Jersey from Canada. He wanted to see it with his own eyes because nobody believes it's real. When you look at what all the other art schools do, this doesn't look possible. And but he came down and he spent a week here, and he went through the beginnings of the program. And at the end of it, he asked me if I'd be interested in digitizing the program. And I said, as long as I didn't have to do the business end of it. I already had businesses. I didn't want to do that anymore. But sharing the education, I was absolutely fine with it. And so, like all of the infrastructure for Evolve, that's Mitch. Mitch built that. There'd be no Evolve without him. I supplied a curriculum, but Mitch built this. He's done an incredible job. It's funny because he's behind the scenes and nobody ever sees him. But he built this. He did an incredible job with it, and he's still building it. He's still working on it. It's not finished yet. I don't know that it ever will be. But yeah, that's basically how Evolve came about. I mean, Mitch found me in my school, came down, checked out the program, and then figured out how to turn it into an online program. And actually, in the interview, I've been called out on this a few times over the years. In the initial interview on Pencil Kings, I am definitive when I say this cannot be taught through the internet. I was definitive in it. And I've been called out a number of times. People are like, well, what happened? What changed? And it took Mitch and me about a year to figure out how to make it work for the internet. It wasn't a small task. And there have been a number of places where we've had to be really creative in how we approach what we do in order to get people to be able to get the result and quality control them and guide them along the path. If you're in the program, you know this program is not like any other program. It's not just videos. There's a lot of interactions, a lot of things that keep you on the path. And it was a matter of figuring out what they were. They all seem very natural to us now, but nobody else does them. A lot of these things are our invention, or they're Mitch's invention, they're Mitch's ideas for how to make sure that the students are guided along the way. And so, but yeah, I said it couldn't be done, and Mitch proved me wrong. So obviously, you know, students all around the world getting these results. It's pretty cool. So, but anyway, that's how Evolve came to be. We're not just kind of scribbling these marks in. The white pencil will just get wiped away later on when it dries.
Hey, Kevin. Helen asked, why not use liquid as a medium to help with the paint's drying time?
Well, actually, liquid is an alkyd, right? So I'm basically using something just like liquid. The stuff that I'm using is an alkyd medium from Old Holland. But you could use liquid. It'll do the same thing, basically. I find that the liquid yellows a lot more. And so depending on what you're doing, you know, you got to be careful about the paint. If you're not putting a good amount of pigment into the paint, you got to be very careful about what medium you use, because some of these things yellow terribly. And so for me, I prefer the Old Holland alkyd medium. But yes, I mean, so you have like, I think there's Galkyd is one from Gamblin. Liquin is the alkyd from Winsor Newton, and then you've got, I'm not even sure what Old Holland calls it, glazing medium, alkyd glazing medium, I think it's called.
Yes, I believe so. On the same topic, is the yellow going to be there forever, or could it be restored to remove that yellow?
No, you can't restore it. The yellow is there. It's part of the material. You can't take it out once it's there. Like if it's in the paint, if you can see it in the paint when you put it down, you know, like you can see, like I've done tests where I've taken all the different alkyds and I've put them on a board with no paint in them. And then I've done another row where there was a small amount of paint, and then a little bit more and a little bit more, and to see which one's yellow and at what level of pigmentation they stop. And like I said, I mean, there's a reason that we work with Old Holland. Old Holland, when I first started testing them, was crystal clear. Everything else was like gooey yellow. It looked like a sinus infection. So, boy, that's an ugly. But yeah, like liquid particularly it looks like snot. And the alkyd from Old Holland is absolutely crystal clear. The yellow you see in this medium is actually the oil. It's not the alkyd. And all of these mediums have some yellowing. I mean, they're oils. They're not clear. You can get them bleached, and there's different things that can be done with them, you know, at the factory, depending on what it is you're looking for. But the nature of them is that they do yellow to a degree. That's just par for the course. Same with varnishes. Varnishes yellow. I'm just pulling this down and getting a little bit of her hair in here. soft edge. There'll be a few lighter things going on in here too, but I wanted to get this darker base. And you can see, I mean, she's starting to pull together beautifully. Not going too crazy. I'm just kind of hinting at a lot of this stuff. I've got a piece of reference over here. You see me turning over here. This is cut out, but I have a full photograph of this.
Harry asked, is the alkyd from Old Holland called something else? I've never found any, not even on the Old Holland website. I think I've actually been seeing a few comments, Kevin, people asking about where can they find the Old Holland alkyd.
I think it's available at the Italian art store, I think.
Yeah.
Italian art store, is it italianartstore.com?
I believe so. I think you have to ask about it via email or phone call, because I haven't seen it on their website.
Yeah, so if you do a Google search and find the Italian art store, it's an online store, and you have to reach out to them, I think, directly. So you have to understand, Old Holland actually brought this product back at my request. It was not, they hadn't made it in a number of years. They brought it back at my request. And so they make it in very small batches, but you can get it through the Italian art store, I'm sure, if you reach out to them. It may not be on the website, but if you call them and you ask, I believe they have it. I'm going to move over onto the other side of things. I'm going to start dropping in some lights. And again, I'm going to go just a little bit lighter than what's down. A little bit lighter than what's here. So again, I got to figure out like what that is. What was down in here is not the same as what's up in here. I think this will probably function as a pretty strong light. Just grab a little bit and test it. You see, I'm just kind of making these quick running marks. The paint is relatively thin. I'm using the flat side of the brush to build out some of the bulk, and then I'll use the side of the brush to create these kind of wisps. Almost no pressure on the brush. Looking for landmarks where the stuff is kind of pulling out from behind her face. Wisps of hair down here. Again, you see, this is not a small brush to be painting hair. You don't need a brush like this to paint individual hairs. You can see them in here. They're nice and fine. I'm just using the side of the brush, the blade edge of the brush. But I'm able to move the brush around for fatter marks and for thinner marks just by changing the direction, flat or on the edge. Allows me to quickly block in this hair. Again, I'm not looking to produce every single hair. I'm looking for an illusion that all the hair is painted, but that I'm not looking to render all of it. I want it to look like I did.
Comment here. Kevin, your observations and descriptions of art are so insightful and valuable. Have you ever thought of writing a book on art instruction?
I created an online program and I opened schools. You know what? I actually started writing a book years ago, but I found it hard to put together. I found it hard to explain everything that I wanted to explain in the book. The chapter headings and all of it, it's all built out, and it's this program. But I've never gotten around to pulling it all together and writing it. And I think even for people who don't jump into the Evolve program, we're creating so much free content. We're creating so much free content that everything I could possibly put into a book would be in these videos, video after video after video. I think this is a much greater format than a book. And I know a lot of people, they like having books. I've learned a lot from books, but this is such a better format, and if I'm going to allocate my time, I'd rather do it here, where I can talk to people, I can answer your questions in real time. You can watch me work. You can see that it is work even for somebody like me, that not everything goes to plan, and how I handle those things, how I move the painting forward. And you know, it's like, I think this is a much better way to do it than a book. Again, before video, I thought a book was a great idea. But once we start doing live streams and things, I mean, again, this is forever, and so much of this stuff is free, right? You can pull together a lot of this information if you watch and you pay very close attention. You can make sense of all of this. I don't know, I think a book is, at this point, it's kind of outdated when you think about being able to get the information like this. And I can say, like, when I was younger, I read books, and I made all kinds of mistakes because I interpreted what I thought the book meant, what something meant, and it meant something else. And had I seen the artist actually do the thing, I would never have made that mistake. I never would have wound up off on a path that I didn't belong on, because I would have seen the thing while I heard how it worked, and it would have just made more sense to me. And again, the beauty is, you can watch this video. Let's say there's something in here that I do that is like, oh, that's what I needed. You could watch this video 1,000 times. It's never going away. Watch it over and over and over until it makes sense, until you see exactly what it is that you were looking for. Like I said, I mean, there was a time that I thought that a book was definitely something I should do. But this format just makes so much more sense to me. So just bringing up this light a little bit. I'm bulking it up a little bit, so it's a little bit heavier, and then I'm going to drop stronger highlights in on top of it. Again, I'm not going down to a little baby brush. I'm using a number 6 filbert, and I'm getting all these beautiful little thin strands of hair. It's the paint. The paint is thin, so it just flows off the brush. I don't require little baby brushes. It's not necessary to paint beautiful hair. In fact, I think it's counterproductive, actually. It creates a lot of work. Generally, whatever the size of the brush in our hand, that's the size of the detail we're looking for. And you know, to paint hair that way, I mean, you literally start looking at every strand, and that's not the way to do it. You want to think in larger pieces, and so a bigger brush allows for that.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Can you explain what glazing is and what products you use for it?
Glazing is basically a suspension of pigment floating in oil. So you would take paint, translucent paint, or they call transparent paint. Let's say alizarin crimson is an example. You want to add red into an area. You would mix the red with oil and it would create a syrup, right? So as an example, here's a red. I mix oil into it and it becomes a syrup. That syrup, the pigment is floating in it. So when you put it down, you can see through it. And it creates a layer and it freezes like that with little dots of pigment. So light shines through it, bounces off the opaque panel, and is reflected back out. It illuminates the paint from behind. It's like backlighting. And if you look at the old master's work, it has this glow to it, and the glow is from glazing. But all it is laying translucent layers of paint on top of your opaques, in the most general description of what it is. Obviously, it requires a lot of practice to get good at. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's a good description as a starting point.
So what would be the difference between thinning down your opaques like you are now versus glazing later on?
I'm sorry, I'm going to flip this over. Get a better angle on this. So, can they see this still?
No, not really.
How much higher do I need to have this?
Keep going. A little bit more, if you don't mind. That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll bring it back down once I've got this area done. So I don't want to get out of the seat. I'd rather sit and work. So I'm just. All I'm doing is playing with my edges now, kind of breaking them up. I'm not going to do any more in here. I'm just going to kind of clean this stuff up. Even out a little bit. It's a little stronger than I wanted it to be. Again, I don't want this stuff very strong anyway. I'm going to go one step lighter in here. Just to bring out a couple of thin hairs out in here. There's really nothing bright in here. I can leave that alone. Okay, so bring it back down. Just in here where I put in these highlights, I want to just pull out a few slightly lighter hairs. Just want them to stand out a little bit. But this feels a little bit more highlighted.
So Kevin, the question there was, what's the difference between thinning down your opaques with that same medium versus glazing?
Well, the opaques don't allow the light to permeate them. So opaques bounce light off the surface of the paint. Glazes allow the light to penetrate and then are bounced back and they show through. It's almost like stained glass on top of your painting.
Awesome, thank you. And is glazing something you can only do with oil paints?
Yeah, I've heard that people glaze with with acrylic, but I don't really know how that works. It seems kind of funny to me. The nature of oil and how it dries makes it possible. So I don't actually know how you would do it with an acrylic. It's possible, but actually don't know with acrylic. Like I said, I I don't know how you would do it with acrylic paint. They'd have to make some kind of special gel medium that would suspend the pigment the same way oil does naturally. And there's probably something that does that. There's probably something on the market. Again, glazing is such a beautiful technique, and if the medium that you have doesn't allow you to do it, it's the point of using that medium, right? If you're cut off from being able to do something that's very beautiful because the tool doesn't allow it, maybe you're using the wrong tool, and so they build a medium specifically to mimic what oil does. That makes sense. It makes sense that they would do that. And just kind of try to get a little bit of movement. I don't want to put too much back in here. I want to leave a lot of this alone.
Following up on the glazes, do you glaze only on, sorry, do you glaze only parts or the whole painting?
It depends on the painting. I mean, generally speaking, you would only glaze the things that demand or require glazing to be effective, right? You would only put it in the places that it's needed. And I say needed. A lot of people, sadly, they use glazing to repair bad paintings, right? They do a lousy job on something, and then at the end they try to recover the painting using glazing, right? They adjust their values because their values are wrong by making something darker. So when you glaze, you can make something darker, and you can change or add color to it. And if you've not done a good job of putting your values in place and doing your job as an artist at the beginning, a lot of artists, what they'll do is I say a lot, but enough artists, what they'll do is they'll fix their painting at the end by glazing. But glazing is not meant to do heavy lifting. It has its limitations, right? And so paint thins down over time, which is another thing. And if you have a painting that's made up of, like the surface of your painting, what makes the painting work as a final painting is nothing but glaze, that paint is going to thin down over time and you're going to lose its color. There's a lot of things that are going to happen. You're going to lose all of the impact of those upper layers. So if your painting doesn't hold up as an opaque, it's going to struggle in time, right? It's just the nature of how this paint works. It does thin out as time goes by. Sure of it. Also, I mean, a lot of these paints, they're light fast now, but not every pigment is. Not every pigment is. I don't want to say immune because I don't think any of them are actually immune to the effects of light over time. But a lot of these pigments nowadays do a pretty good job of standing up to the abuse that light applies to them. But I can tell you, like alizarin crimson is a great color. It's a wonderful color, and was used by a lot of the old masters, I think all of them. And it's a fugitive color, which means that you hit that thing with sunlight or daylight, and that color just disappears. It just vanishes in a very short window of time. It's not light fast. And so a lot of the pigments that are made today are light fast. They are very careful about that. But alizarin crimson isn't, not the traditional version of it, but people still use it because it's a one-of-a-kind color. And it's a really wonderful color. People don't want to take it off their palette. But it does compromise the integrity of their paintings. And here just... Again, I'm just trying to create patterns of movement. Her hair's all braided, I think. I don't know. It's something. I'm going to stop right there with that. What time is it?
It is 9:50.
Okay. I think we're going to stop. We're going to stop the figure at this point. I'm going to move on. I think we're going to call her done. I just want to get up and take another quick look at her. I always take my reference down when I'm done, because I want to take a look at her and just see how she looks. I don't care how she looks compared to the reference. I care how she looks in the painting as a subject of the painting by itself, right? And so the painting with the photograph next to it, I'll be making the comparison. I don't want to do that. think that works. I think we're good. Here. Just losing a little too much. And there's a little bit of light in the photograph up in here. Something is visible. To connect this. Let's move on and take a look at this planet. And again, there's more that's going to go on in here. Like right now, the real focus of the painting, the real bold stuff's not in. So she's not going to look, she's going to look very much unfinished at this point. But she'll be fine later on as the painting progresses because she's not meant to be more finished. She's meant to be subtle. See if we can knock this out now. So for me, what I've got to do is I've got to figure out which things are going to be the panel, which things are going to be darker, and which things are going to be lighter. And so I'm going to start by going in and doing a little bit of, again, just a little bit more of this kind of glazing in. These darks, just like I did on her eyes. This in as the darks, and then I'll start building the lights around it. All right, and there's not a lot in the way of darks in here. A little bit up in here. And again, I'm following the reference, but loosely. I'm not too concerned with this planet. This planet was not my invention. I got it off the internet somewhere. So I'm not worried about making this planet. I'm just looking to approximate. I have this image. I may as well make something from it.
Question for you, Kevin.
Yes.
This is from Legendary Noob. Again, love these usernames.
Okay.
Thank you for the awesome live sessions. Kevin, in the past, did you ever have paintings that turned out so well in the second or third pass that you were afraid to mess it up by applying additional layers? And as a follow-up to that, Legendary Noob is saying, I would also like to know how to get over that fear.
Well, I mean, I remember times when something was working so beautifully that I was afraid to mess it up. But, you know, it's like you can't go through life afraid. I mean, if the painting is done, then it's done. Then you stop. You don't keep painting. And if it's not done, you keep working on it until it is, right? And it's like, so the best way to get around that, I'll tell you how to get around that fear, is to not value the paintings, to value the effort, not the painting, right? If you put your time and energy in and you're proud of the work you've done, not the result, but the actual labor, that you, in every stroke, you mixed the colors and you made sure they were right. You made sure the value was right, you made sure the color was right, and you put them where they belonged, and you made the shapes to the best of your ability, and you managed your edges with each thing as you went down, and you did each thing to the best of your ability. Where you heard that voice in your head, they were like, just kind of hurry up and finish that up. And you were able to say, no, I'm doing this right, I'm not rushing this. And you did that. You can be proud of the effort you put in, knowing that the effort was 100%. That is excellence. Excellence is delivering the best you have in this moment. And you know if you're cheating yourself. The best you have in this moment is all you have to offer. And if you know that that's what you're giving at every turn, the result of the painting doesn't matter anymore. What happens is eventually your efforts elevate your skills to the point where everything you touch goes the way you intend. Maybe not in the steps, but at the end, the painting is what you intend it to be. But you have to be willing to sacrifice some of these paintings along the way. If you're too afraid to sacrifice a painting by risking the next thing that has to be done, there's no growth. You have to be willing to put the painting up on the chopping block and risk it. That's just the nature of growing, right? What do they say? You can't get from this cliff to that cliff without leaving this cliff. You got to jump, right? And it's like if you want to get to where you're going, you have to be willing to leave the safety of this cliff and take the jump to the other cliff. In this, again, and I talk about this all the time with my students, I don't care about the paintings when you're learning. I don't care what they look like. We don't go back and fix things. We move on with the lesson. We learn something, we make mistakes in this painting, we throw the painting away when we're done, but we take the lessons with us so that we don't repeat them. And each time we do that, we eliminate another problem, Never looking back at the paintings we did, only looking forward to the one we're doing next, or the one that we're currently working on. And if you do that, you take the lessons with you, your work is going to get better and better and better, and you'll never be paralyzed by the fear of failure. Because you can only fail if you don't deliver your effort. And that you have control over. You control how much effort you put in. You control if you cut a corner or not. You're learning, there are some things you're just not going to be able to do. They're not going to work out the way you planned because you're learning. Be okay with that. It's okay to be a student. Michelangelo wasn't always Michelangelo. Rembrandt wasn't always Rembrandt. At one point, they were unskilled, fumbling around like the rest of us. And that goes for everybody, every artist, every great artist you've ever seen, at one point had no idea how to do what they are so famous for. It's okay to not be perfect early on. But if you're so focused on being perfect, you'll miss the lessons that will get you there. Got to focus on the lessons and not on the result. And that takes the pressure off. But that's my advice. That's what I would do if I were you. Change your focus. Change what it is that what you're striving for in your work. Because again, you can control your effort. You can control how much effort you put in with every brushstroke you make, every mark, every time you sit down and everything you do. Be proud of that. Deliver 100% there. The paintings will follow. They will come around as long as you keep doing that. So I'm just trying to get a little bit of movement in here, a little variation in this. I know I'm going to be putting a lot of light out here and in this ring, but back in here I'm not going to be doing a lot, and I want to make sure that there's some stuff going on, that it's not just a big flat open thing that looks like the space behind it. Again, it's going to be broken up with stars showing through it also. I'm now looking at how bright this is compared to her in the other photograph to decide how light I want to make this. And it's feeling kind of like what's out here, so I'm going to work with that. Work with that shade. Get a little bit more of the blue in this, so that it fits more in with the color of the background. transfer, I can just follow that line. Slight as I go around.
You're getting lots of thanks in the comments from your little speech there, Kevin. Thank you.
I'm glad that it's helpful. Again, we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform. And it's like, it's funny. I had a conversation with a student a while back in Evolve. Very, very frustrated with himself over his results. He was doing fine at times, and then he would not do fine, and then he'd be fine again. Like he was doing, actually at times, he was doing really good work. And then other times he was just falling on his face. And it was literally his effort. Like there were times that his effort was absolute, and then other times that it just kind of wavered. And it was obvious in the work to me when I looked at it. But he was on the verge of quitting the program. I had a conversation with him. And he said to me at one point, he goes, I should be able to do this. I don't know why it's not working. I should be able to do it. And I at the risk of insulting him, I said, that's arrogant. Who the hell are you that you think you should be able to do this? You're a student here. You're being trained. The expectation is you do not know how to do this and you cannot do it. And we are teaching you how. And a little bit at a time, you are going to creep your way to the place where you can consistently do it because you understand how it works. If you walk into this thinking you should be able to, this should be easy, this shouldn't be so hard, it's arrogance. It's arrogance to think that. You wouldn't walk into an operating room and assume you could be able to just jump in and do neurosurgery, or any surgery for that matter. Why? Because you're not trained. You don't know how yet. You haven't been taught. You haven't been run through the gauntlet yet. Had those things taught to you and then pressure tested in real time. And until you have that, why would you expect to be able to do these things? It's kind of silly. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't been trained in, that if I went and I did them, I would fall flat on my face. I'd embarrass myself, maybe get myself killed. But if I go and I train and I slowly work my way up to those advanced things, I'll be able to do them just fine. Painting, fighting, racing cars, jumping out of it, it's all the same. You wouldn't expect to be able to do something at a professional level or an extraordinary level the first time you do it. Or the second or the third, right? These things take time. Give yourself the breathing room, to be a student. Again, one of the things in Evolve we talk about, so in the first block, we have 20 paintings, 20 homework assignments. And if you come into the program, if you think like perfect is 100%, like a score of 100%. If you come into the program and your first homework assignment is an absolute 0, and I talk about this all the time, an absolute 0, you are an abysmal failure. I mean, you're literally not even getting paint on the canvas. You don't know which side of the brush to use. You're eating paint instead of work. I mean, you're just an absolute wreck. Nothing is right. You're a 0. In the second painting, if you get 5% better, you are still a disaster. You're an embarrassment to your entire family. Like, nobody wants to be your friend, but you're 5% better. In the third painting, if you get 5% better, still embarrassing. Terribly embarrassing, right? There is nothing redeemable here, but you're not a 0 anymore. And if you do that little climb over 20 paintings, when you get to the last painting at 5% growth each piece, you won't just be good, you will be flawless, right? 5% over 20 pieces, 100%, you will be flawless. But you have to grow the 5% in each piece. And if you're so worried about the end result that you're missing the lessons, you don't get the growth. You don't get the painting and you don't get the growth. But if you focus on the growth, the paintings may not work, but the growth happens and eventually it all comes together. Now, I can tell you that within the program, I've never seen anybody that I'd even rate at 50%. coming in. So that means you're only talking about, if you're a 50, you're talking about, and that's in all things, that's a failure, right? 65 is like passing. 50 is a failure. It's embarrassing. It means you really tried and you still failed, right? So at that point, you're only talking about a 2.5% growth over each piece in the block, and you're perfect at the end. Spend your time looking for the growth, not worrying about the finished paintings. I mean, that's the best way to really explain it.
Absolutely. It's funny how once you get over the initial shock of like the arrogance of it all and understand that like you need humility to learn, it actually becomes so much more encouraging and exciting and hopeful that you'll get better. But if you have this arrogant standard for yourself that you can't meet, it's just so much. It's kind of crippling.
It becomes a terrible experience. You could have fun, or you can make it a miserable experience. And if it's a miserable experience, you're not going to succeed. You're going to surrender at some point, right? And so what do? If you can turn it into something that's enjoyable and not put so much pressure on yourself, and that doesn't mean to get sloppy. Deliver the best you have, but don't expect to be better than you are. Do the best you can. Take your time. Be patient with yourself. I mean, that's a huge thing. Be patient with yourself. Let yourself be a student. Let yourself fumble around for a while you figure things out. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's judging. Everybody's so busy worried about their own stuff. You know, focus on your own thing and don't worry about how it appears. Just come in and do your thing. Be surprised how far you'll get if you take that, and not just in painting, in all things in life. How far you'll get if you look for the pleasure in the act of doing something and don't sweat the result. Once you start sweating getting a result, most of the fun of a thing goes away until you achieve the result. But I don't know, I mean, it seems like a lot of time to be miserable as you fight to get there. And what if you never do? Does that thing then become a waste of your time? Right? You spend years chasing a skill, you don't get it, and so all those years were a waste. Rather than looking at it and saying, I enjoyed this thing while I was doing it. I only rose to a certain level, but I always gave it the best I had. Right? I mean, that seems like a much healthier way of going about things. And it's a recipe for enjoying the life you have, living in those moments and enjoying the process of growing. You know? Being okay with not being the best person in the room, or maybe not even becoming the artist or the whatever it is that you want to be, but that you enjoy what you're doing when you're doing it. I mean, that's really what this is about. If you're gonna be miserable making art, you may as well be an accountant. No offense to the accountants out there, but you may as well be an accountant. You know, put yourself through all of this if you're going to be miserable. We do this because it's fun. Let it stay fun. And you do that by taking the pressure off. Like I'm sure you can see it. Like when I'm painting, I'm playing. This is like fun time for me. And it's not because I'm good. It's because I've learned that that's how, like if I'm going to do this, I want it to be fun. Doesn't mean there's no pressure. You think there's no, I mean, think about it. How much pressure do you think there is me sitting here talking to you and trying to paint this thing? You see me fumbling around? Like, there's a lot of pressure. I worry about not being able to deliver because I don't want to waste your time. And that's just a natural fear. I could paint this painting, that's not a problem, but I got to do it in the compressed time, in this space. I can't stand up, I can't sit down, I can't reach over there. Like I have all these constraints, and yet I have to sit here and produce. It'd be very easy to get frustrated and kind of worked up, but I come in and it's like, I'm playing. I'm just having fun. I'll see where it goes. I'll push it around until I get what I need over the next few weeks. But it's like, I'm playing here. This is just fun time for me. And it should be that way for you if you're painting. If you're doing, again, not just painting, but anything that you're doing that you're trying to grow into, let it be playing. Let it be playtime. It's bad, you know, we have enough time that we spend at our jobs doing whatever it is we do for a living. You know, and most of us don't even like what we do. Why would you bring that into the thing that you do for fun? Putting unnecessary pressure on yourself, ruining the joy in the thing, you know? Yeah, so going back to that original question, take the risks. Risk the painting. And don't worry about it if the painting doesn't work out, so what? You'll make another one, and you'll take the lessons from the one that you messed up to the new painting, and your odds will be better of a success. And eventually your odds will be so good that almost everything you touch will be successful. Just a matter of time.
Yeah, Shelley shared, I've been accused of wanting to know, but not willing to learn. It was an eye-opener, and I had to stop and do a lot of self-examination. I've become someone who loves to learn, but it took a while.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. Thank you for that. Very, very nice. Yeah. That's a great way of describing it. Good.
Yeah. And David Prickett shared, and then do 100 paintings with that mindset. And then you have a well-formed habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Da Vinci said that once you master one thing, you've mastered all things. And there's no explanation of what his intent was with that, but I have a feeling from my experience that it's not that everything is so similar that once you've figured out one thing, everything else will make sense, but more that once you've mastered one thing, like in order to master something, you have to master yourself. Control those passions and be patient with yourself and be focused and not cut corners. And once you've been able to do it once for one thing, you now have that skill and you'll be able to apply it to all things. And I could be wrong about that was his intent in that quote, but my experience tells me that that's the truth, that once you get control over yourself, everything then falls within your sphere of influence. Everything that you decide to do becomes manageable because you're the one constant in everything you do. And so if you can command yourself, you command everything that you deal with.
It's 10:13.
Okay.
Vivian shared, okay, that is my issue. Way too hard and demanding on myself. I have at times dreaded picking up a brush, thinking if I don't make the wall, I'm no good.
Well, the truth is, if you don't make the wall, you're terrible, because we let anybody. No, I'm kidding.
What? What's going on?
Again, it's an unreasonable standard. If you just do the work, don't be afraid. Pick up the brush, go to work, pay attention to the lessons, just do the work. You will find yourself there eventually. Just do the work, get in and do it. Don't be afraid. Nobody's judging. Like everybody, at least you're in the Evolve program, everybody in the Evolve team is cheering for you. We want you to succeed. And so you just need to show up and do the work. Don't shy away from it. You'll get all the help you need. We will make sure that you get where you're going. But you have to do the work. We can't do it for you. You have to be willing to accept that you're not going to be the best at the beginning. You can elevate yourself to any level you want if you're willing to do what's needed to get there. And a big part of getting there in something like this is putting your ego aside. Not as easy to do as it is to say, but that's the truth. And if you can get rid of that ego, and we all have it, if you can get rid of that ego, you'll be able to do things because you'll be willing to take the risks. You'll be willing to put yourself out there. You'll be willing to fail and be comfortable with it because it doesn't define you. It's just where you are right now as you're growing. And again, the expectation is you're growing. Not that this is the last stop on the station for you. You're growing. You're just starting. You're starting to figure this stuff out. So the expectation is not for you to be incredible. It's for you to be kind of fumbling around like the rest of us. And trust me, we're all fumbling around. In everything. I mean, as I get older, I realize that more, that nobody has the answers. I don't care what they look like. Nobody's got the answers. We're all just kind of fumbling around through this stuff, figuring it out as we go, occasionally finding a quote that resonates with us and makes us feel like somebody's got an inside track on the information that we're looking for. You know, but I mean, the big thing is get out there and enjoy what you're doing. I can't imagine, again, like doing this and not enjoying it. I don't see the point. Do this for fun. Do this because it enriches your life and makes you happy. Gives you good, healthy downtime. Lets you clear your mind. You know? I kind of ghosted in the planet, and now I'm putting in. I want to wet this whole area with some lighter shades. Like all of these rings are lighter than what's behind it, and so I want to just kind of get one value down that is lighter, and then I'm going to start putting in all the lines, the rings. Definitely, I think I'm going to use a maul stick for that.
Rena shared, my worry has always been that I need to make a good painting because I don't have the money to waste canvases. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but that's, again, if you're so focused on something like that, you know, how can you possibly make the right decisions when that's where your mind is, right? You're so worried about one thing that you're not making the time. You know, it's almost like years ago I owned a publishing company, and one of my business partner, he was doing a lot of the editing, laying out the books. And we wanted to send him for a class. It was a one-week class so that he would learn a layout with this particular program. But we were so busy, he didn't have the time to take the class, okay? And so he was taking 2 weeks to lay out a book. If he had taken the class, he probably could have laid out a book in about 3 days. But he didn't see the value of taking the class because he was so busy focusing on the fact that he didn't have time to take the class because the books were taking him 2 weeks. He couldn't see that if he just stopped, took the class, that he would be able to catch up in like 2 weeks' time. He'd catch up and pass, and then for the rest of his life be able to turn the books around in 3 days instead of 2 weeks. Right? And it's like that kind of a thing is what we're talking about here. Like you're thinking about the money for canvas. Well, you know what? You can do a painting on a canvas and then go buy a bucket of gesso, which costs very little, and paint over that panel, and then do a new painting on top of it and paint over it with gesso, and just keep putting gesso on top of it. It's one panel of canvas, right? You know, and so you could actually just reuse it over and over and over. You go to a store, and again, gesso is really inexpensive. It's just like white paint, but it's inexpensive. You can buy it by the gallon. And you can go to a lumber yard and buy an 8-foot by 4-foot piece of masonite, which is basically what I'm working on here. And it'll run you about $15. And you can cut it into 9 by 12 panels. You'll get like 300 panels out of that. I don't know how many panels, but you're going to get a lot of panels out of that. I think it's going to be like, you get something like 40 panels, 9 by 12 panels, something like that. You paint them with the gesso, you've now got 40 panels to paint on. And of course, yes, there's the cost of paint, there's the cost of everything. But if this is what you do to be happy for in your free time, to feed your soul, this is where you put your money, right? It's value against cost. The value of doing this, having this in your life, against the cost of having it in your life. Right? And again, like I understand, I grew up very poor. So I'm the last you're not going to hear me say, well, just, do without something else. I understand that sometimes that's not a possibility. There's just nothing you can do. There's just limited resources. But there are ways of getting around that. There are ways of getting around that. One of them is having a limited palette. You can look it up online. It costs nothing to go find out about it. But you can have limited palettes. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name.
Not sure I can help you there.
Oh, you're not helping. Anyway, limited color palettes. I forget the guy's name, which is terrible. But there's a guy he painted with 5 colors. Black and white were 2 of the colors. They're 2 of the cheapest colors you could buy. He had 1 red, 1 yellow. I know what the other color was. Brown? Anyway, made full color paintings out of that. Now, it requires an additional understanding of how the colors work, but you can find that stuff and get an education with it online to see how it works. Now you only need 5 tubes of paint. Now you're talking, now it becomes a lot less expensive. There are ways around the budget thing. So, but
Is it the Zorn palette?
Zorn, that's the one, Zorn, yes. Wow,
Yeah.
Shame on me.
Viewers helped us out there.
Yeah, shame on Kevin. I should have known that.
And
Getting senile.
Patrick shared the Zorn palette is black, white, ochre, and cadmium red.
Yeah, there you go. So it's 4. Anyway, you can create an incredible range of color with the Zorn palette. And so a lot of artists play with it because it's a challenge. What can they produce with a limited palette? So there's a real challenge in that. When you're accustomed to having 25 colors on your palette because you can just buy whatever you want, there's a challenge in doing something limited. It forces you to really play with your color mixing skills and how you understand color working. Me personally, I don't want to do that. I've played around with a limited palette, but it's a fun little exercise, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it except as an exercise to kind of play around. But again, you can produce a full range of colors using it once you understand how it works. And it's a way, it's a way of having a full palette on a very low budget. So it's an option for you if it's something that you're interested in looking into. So we are going to now see if we can get some rings in here. I don't know if this might be too... I'm grabbing a little bit lighter. I'm assuming that it's going to mix with what's down here, so I want to make sure that it's light enough that I see it. I can always knock it back later on. That's easy enough to do, but I don't want to have to draw these lines multiple times. I'd like to be able to put them down once, not look at it again. So, mall stick. Just trying to see where this mark is. I want to plan the whole mark if I can. I don't know if I can, maybe too much of a reach. It's a little bit wobbly. I'll deal with the wobbly nature of it later on. Holding my breath on these. Just trying to make sense of some of this stuff. There's a lot going on in here.
Question for you.
Yes.
What's better for lines like this, a number 2 or a 6?
Lines like the ones I'm doing?
Yep.
I'm down on a number 2 right now. These are really fine. I'm using a filbert. Gone down to like to a round. I'm gonna kind of play with these. I'm not exactly sure how I'm handling this at the moment. I'm just trying to get some placement in here. Make sense of all of the marks that I have. Once I've got some paint on, I'm probably gonna drag the paint hard in this direction, which will straighten out some of the lines, maybe. And I may have to go over them again later on in another pass. That's a distinct possibility. That's fine. Again, it doesn't have to happen in one pass. It just has to work by the time the painting's finished. Figure it out as I go.
Evan, are you holding your breath?
Yeah, a little bit. Not on every mark, but on some of them. Check.
The time is 10:30.
Okay. And again, at this point, this is a point of reference, but I'm not faithfully representing these lines. They're so thin, there's no way that I could possibly match them. I need a magnifying glass. I need to be Anthony Wachulis. The only guy I know who would make every line. He'd do it in style, too. Anybody who's not familiar with Anthony Wachulis, you should go check him out. He runs the Annie Academy, ANI. Incredible Trompe l'oeil painter. The greatest of our time, no doubt. Maybe the greatest of all time. Can you put his name in there? It's Waichullus. Anybody who doesn't know his work, you should definitely check him out.
Yep, got it.
He's absolutely brilliant. Nice guy, too. It's like this is where like I'm starting to get sloppy with my marks. And it's like, even I'm capable of doing that. You know, I could talk about, you know, when you hear that voice, like, hurry up, just get it done. It's okay, that's a mess, but it's okay, just leave it. It happens to me too. Like, I'm in a rush, I want to get this thing done. I don't want to leave this undone today. That way I don't have to deal with it again next week when we come in. And there's a good chance, like, if I get this done, I'll probably just knock out the planet sometime between now and when we start up next Thursday, just so that I don't have to deal with these same colors again. I'll do it while this paint is still wet and just knock that out. And at this point, you should understand how all of this works. You shouldn't require seeing it. It's just going to be more of what I just did on the planet up in here. But here you can see the rings being done. And again, I mean, not perfect. I will clean them up as I go. This impulse to just kind of move through this now, and I'm like trying to shut it down in my head, trying to like get myself to slow down. It's hard because I know that we're on the clock. We have a half hour. Get it done. I don't want to run over if I can help it. So what I'm thinking is that even with what I'm doing, I'm going to be able to clean this up, I believe. And so I'm allowing myself to be a little sloppier because I have a plan to fix it. But I can tell you that that's really not the way to do it. I may find that I'm wrong about the fact that I can clean this up afterwards, and then I'm gonna have a mess to deal with. So it's not something that I recommend. You're watching me rush, and I'm kind of being a bit of a hypocrite because I tell you never to do this, but I'm doing it because I want to get done. And I believe, like I said, I'm not just doing it, I believe I have a plan that will work to clean up the stuff that's not exactly what I want it to be. I wouldn't allow myself to move quicker like this if I didn't believe that I could manage the painting on the other side of this decision. If I didn't have an idea in my head about how to get this where I want and need it to be, I would be working much slower, and I would just accept the fact that this is going to roll over into another week, or we're going to run late tonight. I did have a trick for this kind of stuff when I was an illustrator. Trying to remember exactly what I used to do. There's a trick for cleaning up straight lines, and again, I think it's just kind of pulling a brush. Pretty sure I remember. It's been a while. Joking around during dinner, saying I need to get a shirt that says hypocrite on it because I'm constantly doing this, doing stuff that I tell you not to do. Show up one day in pajamas and a hypocrite shirt, you'll know where it came from.
Yeah, as Kevin likes to say, do as I say, not as I do.
Well, I've earned the right. I've earned the right to be able to do what I want. Again, you know, like as you get better at doing this stuff, the rules eventually become suggestions and nothing more. You can't treat them that way when you're learning. But once you know what you're doing, the rules, they just guide you, the decisions you make. You're not locked into any of them. You can do whatever you want. One of the nice things about understanding how the fundamentals work, once you've got them and they're yours, you don't answer to anybody. You can do whatever you want with them. That's pretty cool. That's real freedom. And it's what you see going on here. Like, I've got lots of freedom because I know what I'm doing. I understand how all of these things work. So I'm never afraid of getting to a place where a painting gets out of my control. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. Right? I can overreach just like anybody else. I can bite off more than I can chew, just like you. But it's less likely at this point because I have so much experience. Right, so here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this nice, clean, straight pole. And again, it's going to blur a little bit, but that's okay. In one clean direction. Try to get that curve in. Long strokes. Again, I may need to go over this again, but I'll be able to go over it thinner. A lot of these things will be in, they'll feel nice and straight. Yeah, I mean, they're actually straightening out nicely.
Vivian went ahead and took a look at Anthony Waichulis. She
Yes.
said, wow, that artist is amazing. How does one achieve that level of realism?
A lot of focus. A lot of focus. He doesn't cut any corners. Understands what he's looking at, and he doesn't play games. I mean, yeah, his stuff is impressive. Like I said, I mean, he is arguably one of the best, if not the best, trompe l'oeil painter that's ever lived. He happens to live in our time. Work is incredible. It's funny, I know a lot of people who are not a fan of what he does, but I've never once heard anybody ever question his skill. Right? They may not like the look of the work. It's not their aesthetic. They think it's unnecessarily rendered. Right? For that, why not just get a photograph? But it's impressive. I've never heard another pro ever. Other pros you hear stuff, but with him, I've never heard another pro ever say anything about his skill. His skill is just off the chart. Really, really great stuff. And the prints online do not do his paintings justice. Not even close. If you ever get a chance to see one of his paintings in person, take it. His work is stunning. It's just absolutely beautiful. You wouldn't catch me dead painting like that. It's too much work. I got into painting so I wouldn't have to work like that. I wouldn't have to work hard. Right? I'm trying to work smart, not hard. And so, you would never see me doing that because it's too much work. I don't believe I have the capacity to do that. Like it's beyond me.
Is that like capacity in your character, like your work ethic, or would you say capacity in your personality? Like where does style fit into all of
this? Yeah,
this?
I would say personality. I mean, to sit in labor for 5 hours in a 1 inch by 1 inch space, I don't have the focus for something like that. I can appreciate it in somebody else, but I marvel at it when I see it in other people, to be quite frank. I'm patient only to a degree with myself. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I see Anthony's work. I'm blown away by it. I know what goes into it, and it is impressive. He said, you ever get a chance to see his work in person, take it. It's quite a spectacle. Like I said, he's a really nice guy, too. Really nice guy. And so I've kind of pulled all these rings, really kind of, for the most part, straighten them out. And again, I don't need them to be perfect for what I'm doing. I need them to just be basically straight. I need them to look like they're rings going around. And this will do for now. I think I'm going to add a few more now that I've got these in place.
We are at 1040.
Breaking up some of these bigger openings. Again, much like I did with the face, I'll be able to go back into this and lay in a slightly lighter value later on and bring out a couple of stronger rings. But now all I need is the impression of the movement. Don't need more than that. It was easier to get some of the bigger ones and then go back in and get some of the smaller marks in between. Grab the soft brush again. Again, this planet can be ghosted out just like the face. Doesn't have to be razor sharp. In fact, it probably would benefit from not being. Soften some of the stuff and make it nice and just a little bit out of focus. Again, it still has to be relatively straight. The marks can't be sloppy. But you can see they're pretty straight. Not perfect, but pretty straight. I'll be able to go in and kind of clean some of that up later on.
Question for you, Kevin. When you worked as an illustrator, had you painted with oil to do your work, or had you used other mediums as well?
I just worked with oil, nothing else. Didn't know anything else. So, yeah, I was the only medium. Just going to bring up the light on the planet a little bit. Again, I'm not blending this stuff smooth. There's lots of little brush strokes in here. Just gives it a little bit of character. It's all too smooth. Looks too sterile. Right, these are all organic objects. The face, the rings, the planet. And so I want to make sure that they have something organic about them, that they feel organic. I don't want the marks to look like brushstrokes. I want them to feel like something you would expect to see here in this space.
Question from Sandra. Do you ever get caught up in details while working on like the planet that is out of focus or ghost-like?
Yes, it happens. I'm not that practiced. I was talking about this last week. I don't do a lot of paintings these days. And so I am out of practice, and I do get caught up making rookie mistakes. Funny, like I don't realize just how out of practice I am. I don't do a lot of paintings these days. And so when I am painting, like the Grand Master portrait, I'm really focused on what I'm doing. I'm really paying attention, because if I'm not, I'm going to get myself kind of lost off in the weeds. And so, even though I was talking, I was very focused. I knew, like I was really thinking about the work before I came into work. Like, this is different. I'm really kind of coming in and just sitting down and looking like, okay, what are we going to do now? But I can get caught up in the details. And if you remember in the Grandmaster portrait, I painted half the face, detail to detail to detail. I got about halfway in and wiped the face off. I remember people in the live stream are like, I'm having a stroke watching you do that. But I realized about halfway into the process of painting that face that I was painting it in a way I didn't want to. And so rather than just finish it up the way it was, I backed away from it and wiped it off and started it over in a less detail-oriented fashion. And the truth is, it didn't look much different when it was done. The second approach didn't look much different than the first approach, but it was, like, for me, the idea that it wasn't a detail-oriented approach, the second approach at it, that it was more general. It felt better to me. And so for me, wiping it off, even though I had already committed, I don't even remember how many hours. It was a lot of hours already committed to that face in a single day. I took it off because it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It didn't occur to me until I was well into it, though. Right? I didn't realize I was painting detail to detail, which is kind of silly. How could you not know that? But I didn't realize it's what I was doing until I got into a point. And I realized, and I think in the video I said, like, I was exhausted from doing it, and I shouldn't have been. And that was really the red flag. I shouldn't have been exhausted from working on that face. It should have been relaxing. And it wasn't. And that was a red flag that something wasn't right in what I was doing. And so, yeah, I mean, I do get myself caught up. I said, I mean, one of the things you should be taking away from what I'm doing, like all these conversations we're having, is like I'm solving the same problems as you are when I work. I'm not special. I'm just more experienced. That's all it is. It's the only advantage I have, is that I got here first. That's it. Other than that, what you do and what I do, it's the same thing. Same struggle. I make the same mistakes as you do at times. I might hide them better. They may not like trip me up as much, but I make mistakes. Constantly putting things into a painting to test them to see if they work, because I don't always know. I have an idea that something will work or that it won't work, but I test it. I try things out. Like I was saying earlier, I don't shy away from risk when I'm working. I'm completely fine with a painting. Not with commissioned pieces. Obviously, I have to be very careful. Like, those paintings have to be done, and they have to be done on a deadline. But on anything that's not a commissioned piece, the painting's always at risk. I'm always willing to try something new. So, going back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as like, your growth is in the risk, right? As long as the risk is thoughtful, that's where you're going to grow. It's where you're going to learn the most. So for me, I'm always taking those risks when I can. And so the paintings are always going to be challenging in that way.
It is 10:51.
Okay. And I am just about done with this. I think a little bit of this planet too. So the planet is right in here. Locating the edge of the planet is I just want to put the edge of the planet in, soften this edge. I just want this, I'm just trying to get a little bit of an edge in here so that I'm dissolving this while it's still wet. I'll deal with the rest of this. Like I said, I'll probably do it tomorrow. I'll do it off camera, but I'll knock out the planet. And again, it's just going to be more of the same of what you've seen up here. It's nothing new. I won't do anything that's new off camera. Anything that you haven't seen, I'll make sure I do it on camera. But if it's just more of the same for a while, I'd rather move the painting forward a little bit. Next week when we come in, I'd like to get the ground in here knocked out. Possibly, this might not be a lot of work, and so possibly even really polish off the background with some glazing. But that requires that this portion of the painting, this planet, be painted in. So, better for me to do it in off hours. So I'm going to have a relatively clean edge up here, and then I'm just going to break this edge up so that I'm not having to deal with a hard edge down here when I paint later on. I just want this to be a little bit softened.
Kevin, are you taking questions at this time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So question from the family of art is the username. How can I do realistic sketch in an instant?
I have no idea. Realistic art takes time. You're not going to be able to just scribble out something realistic. It takes a little bit of time. You know, so you can do a proportional drawing of a figure in a relatively quick time, in a matter of a couple of minutes. But that's a proportional drawing. It doesn't look like a live person. It just is a proportional representation. But to produce something that looks alive, that's never going to be something that just rolls off a brush or a pencil. There's a lot of work that goes into bringing something to life like that. It's not a simple undertaking that can be done with the flick of a brush and a few strokes. Again, creating something that represents something real, that can be done very quickly. Again, just a proportional drawing of a figure can be knocked out pretty fast. But that's not the same as having something look alive. That takes time. That takes time when you're working.
Yeah, and I have seen Kevin throw some sketches together incredibly fast. I think there was actually one time I, just for fun, challenged him to like a drawing. I don't know who can draw a portrait better in. What did we give ourselves, like a minute or something?
Something like that.
And I grabbed my pencil and kind of started my eyes and my nose and my mouth, and I'm trying to get all my shapes in. And Kevin took this big block of charcoal, and with a few strokes, he just blocked in his shadows, and then he grabbed a white charcoal pencil and just added a couple specular highlights for where the light would be. And just like what Kevin is saying, it wasn't fully realistic, but you would see it out of the corner of your eye, and you would think that it was completely. It wasn't until you looked at it that you realized it was actually just a very quickly thrown together portrait. But it was unmistakably a face with emotion and everything. It was pretty cool. So I would say, like, while nothing can be done instantly, you can really create an impression very quickly. And I would say especially through just a basic understanding of light and shadow. A fundamental understanding would probably be a better word there.
Dropping a little bit of this glaze blue helped me kind of clean up this edge a little bit. Bands. I'll stop right there. This is all sinking in, but we'll seal this. We'll seal this, and actually all of this will be sealed. This will be finished when we come back. I'll get the planet done. And then next week when we come in, we'll knock out the rocks in the background. I think what we're going to do is we're going to knock out the kind of mountain range in the background, and then glaze in the background, finish everything back here, so that all that will be left the week coming in is the rocks and the girl up front. So that's my thinking. I'm going to have the planet finished. You can see this glow right here. This is nice. It's not going to take much to scribble in my lights for the clouds that are on this planet. And then the following week, like I said, we'll get the rocks in. There's not a lot to them. And then once they're in, we'll polish off. We'll finish the background, the stars and all of that stuff. So you'll see how that works. That should actually be a nice day. It's gonna really set the stage for bringing this girl to life. So, but that's looking pretty good. I'm very happy with the way it's coming around. And again, you can see I softened all these edges. If I want them sharp later on, I can always make them sharp, but I don't want them to dry sharp and then realize I need them to be soft. They'll be impossible to get rid of. Feeling good with the planet, all the bands going around it. I am going to be able to clean this up even further later on. But everything's nice and straight. It feels pretty good at the moment. I'll glaze a little color in that in the next week, and then put a few clean, really bright lights going around, and it'll tighten up beautifully. Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy with the way it's progressing. Happy with the face. It's all looking good. I mean, once it's dry and it's sealed, we'll see if there's anything else that needs to be touched up. And I will keep this paint an extra week. I can still dig into it. There'll be little pockets of paint just in case I need to touch up anything up in here. I will have the paint. I can always remix it as well. But it's like if it's here and I'm only digging into it a little bit, so the back ends of each of these puddles is still it's protected from air, so it's not going to dry. But anyway, I'm feeling pretty good. This sky is going to really open up when we put all the stars and everything in. There's armor that's going to go in here. I may put that in as well. I may put this in. There's a lot of like light in here behind this arm, and there's some details for some armor. I may put that stuff in. You're going to see me paint the armor in here, so it's really just, again, it's just going to be like one shade, scribbling the shapes the same way I did this, the same way I did the wisps of hair, and so it's again, it's just more of the same. I'll decide if I think that there's an entire day of work here, I may just hold off and wait for next week, and we'll just tackle it together. I'll see how I feel as I'm looking at it. I'm seeing lots of little things going on in here. I'm not sure how much of it I want to put in, but if I think that it's a full day of work, I'll hold off on it, and you'll get to watch me do it. Otherwise, when we come back, that'll all be placed. I know that this light is going to be dramatic when I put this in. It's going to be really dramatic. And I think I want to do it in front of you. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Cool. Are you taking a question?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. How will you store the paint on the palette?
You know what, I'll just throw another piece of, this sat just like this, exposed the whole week, just sitting here on the table. What I could do is I could take another piece of palette paper and put it wax side down on top so there's no dust or anything. We don't have a lot of dust in here. There's no carpet or anything like that, so the paint is pretty much okay like this. But yeah, I would just put another piece of palette paper, wax side down, on top of this, and that'll protect it from dust, and just leave it like that. I'm not one for putting my paint in the freezer. Some people do that. I find that if you do that, the paint gets really stiff and it's unpleasant to work with. I just leave it. I don't have to do anything special with it. Any other questions?
No, that is it.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for making it out again. I mean, as always, I know that you can spend your time on just about anything and that you're spending it with me. I do appreciate it. I hope that this was helpful and that you'll be able to take some of what we've done today and make it your own. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday.